Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. As you come into the Zoom room, please make sure to put yourself on mute, please and thank you. We will begin our labor market presentation in about a minute as everyone joins us here today. Good morning. Yes, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Keela, it's really nice seeing you as well. Thank you. Great. Great. As you enter the room, please make sure to put yourself on mute. Please and thank you. Welcome. Okay, great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you everyone who has joined us here today. It is always great seeing everyone gathered through a virtual lens and ready to participate in what we have in store for you. And with that being said, welcome to Workforce Planning Hamilton's Local Labor Market Plan and Community Consultation of 2020-21. My name is Khadija Hamidou, and I am the Executive Director for Workforce Planning Hamilton. And today our goal is to research, consult, and present a new labor market plan in Hamilton for this year with a continuation into the 2022 year. Our presentation will update you all on local labor market information, including relevant community indicators, and overall showcase how Workforce Planning Hamilton has continued to document new and evolving trends in Hamilton's labor market. And with the help of everyone here today, our community partners, we will be able to continue this conversation and incorporate your thoughts into the community planning process. Therefore, smile for the camera. This session is being recorded for record keeping, quality assurance, and training purposes. At Workforce Planning Hamilton, we envision a thriving Hamilton community where local labor market issues are being addressed, are being proactively addressed, and all individuals and organizations can achieve their potential. As we become more hopeful in the change of the pandemic, planning becomes all more relevant and timely. Workforce Planning Hamilton is funded in part by the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario. We work closely with employment organizations such as Employment Ontario agencies, City of Hamilton, job seekers, schools, and employers. We also provide free information about the local labor market plan, as well as the local labor market industries and occupations in demand in Hamilton's region, as well as provincially wide. With that being said, I would like to pass it on to Victor, who will go through our LMI information and an overview of the background. Victor?
Providers, education, according to progress. So it incorporates local labor market data, and then we set the priorities to help address the labor market needs. So this is a community plan. So anything that the community talks about, what the data shows, we all try to work together. When Khadija goes through a lot of the priorities and the actions that we're doing, you will see a lot of other projects in the community going on. So we really try to be that middle broker, and this is an important aspect of labor market planning. So what we do is we have the data analysis, which I've done. That is also continuously happening every single month. EO data analysis and consultations. Community consultations, that's the middle part, that's where we are now. There will be other employer consultations, employer one, that will be occurring in January, and then our plan will be released early next year, right before the fiscal year is done. So if I just, to dive right in, as you know, along in the news, you're seeing a lot of headlines regarding job shortages. You know, Financial Post, for example, says it's not going to change. The long and short of Canada's job vacancy problem. You know, some salaries up drastically as Canada impact of labor shortages. There's a lot of headline news out there about shortages. And now this story is evolving, and I'm not saying that this isn't the case, but I just want to reiterate that when we do look at the data, the story is a bit more complicated. So I'll just read this here. So in 2021, it is challenging to identify clear trends in the labor market as there are still many uncertainties. So for example, the virus resurgence, and the job market is still adjusting. There's some evidence for shortages in some occupations, but overall it is not clear if there's a labor shortage so far overall. Now, this may change in the coming months. That's why we will be tracking it. But also other factors could come into play that may remedy the situation. And maybe we can talk about this. For example, employment recruitment strategies. And I just want to mention that education could still be one of the biggest divides, and that sometimes doesn't get as much attention in the news. And I just want to say a few things. I'll be showing a lot of data. We will take breaks. Some of the chat, or if you have any questions, maybe save it for the chat. I will have time for some questions. There's a lot of parts that we can dive into. I'm just focusing on some parts, and even for the consultation part, we really want to focus on some of the main parts. There's a lot to talk about. And again, as I mentioned, Workforce Planning Hamilton is following the trends and seeing what's going on. And I'm not dumb here. I know that there's a lot of shortages happening. The new data just came out. This fall period will be a very interesting time for shortages. So where's my mouse? If we just quickly recap last year, I just want to show the job postings, and we can see that this is the percentage of job postings compared to the previous year. So we saw at the beginning of the year, it was actually trending down. And I remember before COVID, there was talks about a potential recession. Then the lockdowns happened, and you can see job postings dropped about 40% compared to last year. When the restrictions lift, job postings go back up. And then the job postings were falling in September, right before I think there was another lockdown that happened in October. So lockdowns obviously have a major impact. And when we did the Employer One survey in January, we see that this is the question was asked, how did COVID impact your business revenue in 2020? So we can see that 26% had a drop of 25 to 49%, 14% had a drop of 50 to 74, and 12% had 75% or more. So if you add those up, that's 52% of employers had a drop of half or more of their revenue. There's the comments about some employers. The reality is, even when the lockdowns are lifted, the majority of my clients are still afraid to come in and be serviced. So at the time of January, it was a very troubling time. And this is why I'm saying the labor market, the stories we had about brick and mortar, retail trade, will that, never recover? And now all of a sudden we're switching. So this is why it's not always as clear. We have to really see, I don't believe the dust is all settled. At that time as well, 46% of employers, their priority was increasing online presence, increasing marketing, finding and applying to provincial and federal funding programs, obtaining a better understanding of the funding programs. We see that it was just almost survival and just adjusting. Attracting new employees, offering co-op, that was down on their priorities. So we see how this has changed, and it's really, it's human, it's very much human to be like, at the moment this is what's happening. So that's why I just want everyone to take a step back. Even in this shortages, the labor market is adjusting, because at that point there was fears of a massive recession. And if it wasn't for the government funding, I don't have a chart here, but if you look at the Employer One, a lot of employers were using the wage subsidy and still are. Like, that's one of the biggest ways they're still surviving. So if we look at 2021 thus far, we see that it's a slow recovery. This green line is the Hamilton unemployment rate, and it's just slowly going down. It's going sideways since the lockdowns, or January. There was a lockdown here where it went up, and now we're going back down. I don't have the new data that just came out last Friday, but the unemployment rate went down to around 6 or 7%, and went down even lower. And as you can see, Hamilton is just slowly recovering here. Other areas, it depends on the area. Niagara is still very high unemployment rate. They have a lot of food, accommodation, food services, tourism, and that has not recovered at all. Other areas are recovering. So that's why the Ontario unemployment rate is actually starting to get closer. Hamilton's always been a bit lower than Ontario, and now that gap's closing. So I just want to mention so far that Hamilton's economy is recovering, but it's a slow, gradual recovery. When we look at the employment loss, this is from pre-COVID to where we are as of August, so I don't have the September data. Hamilton was still below its peak. We were 2% below. Ontario was 1% above. With the new data that did come out, I think we just reached back to full recovery in Hamilton. But as you can tell, it was still not on par with the other areas. So Hamilton, again, is recovering, but it is taking a bit of time. And this is coming from a time in January when it looked quite bleak for a lot of industries in Hamilton. The other point I want to mention is that there is also still weakness in the labor market, and I will get into a bit more of that as we're going on. This is the hidden unemployment rate. You know, it measures the people discouraged workers. So it's not just the unemployed workers, it's also the discouraged searchers, people waiting for jobs, involuntary part-time. That's the other thing with the labor market, is you have to understand that a job is not just a job. There are good jobs and sometimes bad jobs. And if someone just is looking for a job, they may get one, but they may want a full-time job. And so this is keeping track of it. I mean, this was still around 12%. I mean, it peaked to nearly 20%. That's the highest it's ever been. This is Ontario data. But, you know, before COVID, it was around 8%. So there's still some weakness in the labor market. This next part now, I just want to do gender and age analysis, and I think it's critical information. When we look at the job losses by male and female, and we look at Hamilton, Ontario, so females still have not recovered, both in Ontario and Hamilton, in terms of total employment pre-COVID. We see a much greater loss in Hamilton, 7% down. So that's 14,300 workers. I will say there is a caveat in August, because education services, so teachers, do sort of complicate the data, because some teachers may be counted as unemployed during this time. Believe it or not, come September, it will go up. But the overall trend is still there, and we see it in Hamilton as well. This is now, I just wanted to show how it differs for part-time and full-time. So for males, part-time work, it's still down by 8%. For females, it's both full-time and part-time, but mostly part-time work. That's where we're seeing the biggest weakness. Now, when we look at age, there's a lot of numbers here. There's a lot of charts, 2 charts here with a lot of numbers. I just want to highlight the main points here. Core age workers, 25 to 44, that's where we still see some weakness. Oops. Now, if I go back, okay. We still see some weakness for core age workers. But what's interesting is young people. So we have 15 to 24. If we break that apart, 20 to 24 years old, still not recovered. 25 to 29, below 13%. So again, this is pre-COVID to August, the percentage change of employment. There's still a lot of young people who have not recovered. And again, when we think of, when you finish potentially secondary or post-secondary school, those connections are not there. So for young people in Hamilton, there are concerns with that. And we don't see that same case in Ontario, those trends. Now we'll do age and gender. We see that for young people, we do see a drop 25-29 for both males and females, but females for 20 to 24 and 25 to 29. So, young females still are seeing weaknesses in the labor market. Core age workers, it's both males and females. And I just need to move everybody's faces. Among older workers, it's mostly females. It still hasn't recovered. We're down 3. These are in thousands. I don't know if that's clear. These numbers are 3,100 people for females 55 to 64 and about 365 and over. So we're seeing females across most age groups. There being some weaknesses, and males at the core age workers mostly. So this is the other part, education. So as you can see, now this is July. I haven't included the newer data, but the trends have been same throughout. when you look at pre-COVID and up to that point, the unemployment rates are always higher among people who have high school or less. And then if you have post-secondary, you have lower unemployment rates. I think that's one thing that the media sometimes doesn't focus on, and a lot of the jobs, and this is where we talk about the retraining that is possible. Maybe we do need to do it. Maybe someone doesn't want to, I understand, but education is still a great way to sort of mitigate the recession that happens. Even in 2008, when that happened, education still played a big factor. So I just want to take a pause here. We've gone through the last year, how it looked, how Hamilton's doing so far, and then a gender and age sort of analysis. If there's any comments or questions, feel free, you can mention it now. I think the way to do it, maybe just, it's hard to, I don't know if I should, you can just start talking, to be honest, right now, and then we'll answer it, because I won't stop sharing my screen at this point. But if there's any comments or questions, feel free, and then we'll move on to the next part.
Hi, Victor. My name's Erin. I'm the youth case manager with the City of Hamilton for Ontario Works. I believe you came to a meeting with my team a little bit ago.
Yes.
And so I should say that I'm not surprised to see that youth in Hamilton, that their employment trends are not following youth in Ontario. And I think that's really because, as we discussed, the lack of support programs for youth in terms of employment programs through EO services. I know it's really hard for me to be able to refer my clients places. That kind of support under the new SSM really is a barrier for clients, and I think that is reflected in the trends that we've seen here.
Okay, no, thank you so much for that comment. So you're saying that we're not seeing a lot of the almost like structural programs that are available for youth in Hamilton then?
Yeah, absolutely. This summer, I found that there wasn't really anywhere to refer my clients to if they were in school, returning to school in September, and seeking employment. There just wasn't a service provider. I could send them out of Hamilton to participate in maybe virtual programs at Burlington, but there was nothing in Hamilton available for my youth.
Wow, that's really good to know. So these are the things that we're hoping people will mention. So thanks so much, Erin. And then maybe in the consultation, we can even talk about that a bit more, because that's
certainly.
It's always good sometimes. This is why the consultations are important, is sometimes the data doesn't match people's experience. So it's always good that if it does.
Thank you.
I don't know if there's any other comment. I mean, we have time for maybe
we have
one more.
A question in the chat from Sarah. Oh, now we have two questions. So Victor, can you explain the wide gap between Hamilton and Ontario on the one slide that showed Ontario positive and Hamilton negative?
Yes. Yeah, well, this is total employment change, okay? So this is pre-COVID, February to August. This is in the thousands, so I should have mentioned that a bit more, so apologies. So this is 43,600 jobs in Ontario. That's the change. So they've gone based on how many jobs there were in February and how many jobs there are in August. Ontario actually has more jobs pre-COVID. So Ontario has finally passed its pre-pandemic employment levels. Whereas Hamilton, we were still about 8,000 below, and it's been slowly approaching. Now, next month's data, so September, I think that we just actually passed it. So it just shows the highlight that Hamilton compared to the community is, while we are doing well, I don't want to say some places aren't growing and some companies aren't doing well. The overall trend is still a slow recovery that we've noticed here. And I'll go into some of the industries, the bigger industries in Hamilton, that what might be causing this. But that's what that slide is. Okay, I think I'll go on now into, if there's any other comments, leave them in the chat. We'll try to address it. I can always address it after any of this too. Okay, so this looks like a scary slide, but this is the EO data. And I looked at the year-over-year change, this column here, in the last 5 years. So we're seeing a lot of red. A lot of the programs saw a drop in clients during COVID, whether it's the employment services, literacy basic skills, youth, Job Connect, you know, OEAS, there was a drop in the number of clients. There really isn't too much to even elaborate. I will say second career actually went up, and I did want to ask the service providers about that because I'm under the impression that it is possibly changing. But there was big drop-offs. Employment services, for example, it was down by 34%, a third. Employment services, the unassisted clients, about half. And these trends are similar to the region as well. If we look at right now, just employment services, so again, large drop in clients, changes in ES clients similar to other areas. There was no major changes for the demographics. So even though I did mention that job losses, there seems to be more in female. During COVID there was still a lot of men that were facing, you know, job losses, and the client share load didn't change. No source of income was the largest share. EI did double in terms of share of clients. OW has declined the most in both of terms of share and total. And I think that is because I think, well, I'll let them comment on maybe Ontario Works, why we're seeing that. Designated groups, 77% represented designated groups. These are potentially newcomers, visible minorities. That's a large percentage. And I do remember there was so last year someone telling us that this is sort of a self referral, like you market yourself. So it could be overshadowed. And I do want, you know, a service provider hopefully to clarify that. Less than 3 months was still the largest, you know, time out of work for the clients. There was an increase from 3 to 12 months, but still a quarter of clients have been out of work for 12 months. So there still are, you know, a lot of clients with multiple barriers that are still among the client load. That didn't change. Employed outcomes, the share of employed declined from 69 to 53%. Unemployed increased from 7 to 9. The largest increase was unknown, actually. So 9 to 18% of clients was unknown in terms of what happened to them. Training and education did increase, but it was a slight 12 to 14. So now, for the service providers, in regards to the clients last year, so I'll ask this first question. Are you seeing any major differences in last year's clients than previous years? So I guess from COVID time, so we're going back to COVID time, were the clients different, the ones that were coming in, than previous years? Maybe you can even mention the large drop-off. And I guess you could comment on even currently, are we seeing a difference in terms of clients? So are there any employment service providers that would like to comment here?
If you would like to comment in the chat or raise your hand, please feel free to.
Beth Gibson speaking for Mohawk College Community Employment Services. So we are an employment service provider at our Fennel and Centennial location. This data it's very much in line with what we've been dealing with this past year. We're dealing with an Employment Ontario transformation coupled with a pandemic and a lack of motivation for people to enter the job market. So what we end up doing is we're part of the community partnerships and learning. We encourage through that educational stream for our job seekers that are motivated, but maybe lack some skills that need some upgrading to either consider participating in employment pathway programs at City School or at IWC or the Y or Goodwill or, you know, all of the other service providers to help them upskill. But we've seen a decline in referrals, even a decline in the marketing and promotions that we're doing. I think also we have to take into consideration mental health and how that has played a tremendous impact for folks that are seeking employment. We're having a lot of those conversations internally, and of course, access services with Path Employment Services for some case conferencing. Until there are lots of jobs, people will say that all the time, there's jobs on every corner, but depending on what you're interested in, depending on how long you've been out of the labor market, all play a huge role in someone's motivation and as well as confidence in re-entering the labor market. So there's a lot of retail jobs, there's a lot of service jobs, but if that's not what you're looking for, some folks are still holding out and waiting, as you had articulated earlier, for that position, and they're not really interested in looking at a survival job. There are supports and resources for unemployed individuals as they're navigating the pandemic. So that's kind of what we've seen over the past year.
No, that's really interesting, and we will talk about jobs very shortly, like specific ones. And so the point you brought up about the mental health of clients. So now you did see a drop off in clients last year. Now, are you seeing more clients returning or coming into your place? I think you said Mohawks. Are you seeing more clients returning now and looking for jobs? But you did mention that there are still quite a few that are just unmotivated still, right?
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer, honestly, Victor. We have more unmotivated people than we have motivated people to enter into the labor market. So one of the things that we often do is, we have workshops that we can, have people participate in just to get into that routine of getting up and being somewhere. We're delivering our services entirely virtually. Some of our colleagues within the network are doing by appointment only, face-to-face, but just trying to get people into that routine and pattern. We've seen and again, I'm sure my colleagues on the call will say the same, the number of clients that we have walking through our doors compared to pre-pandemic, there's no comparison. They're just, people are not, for various reasons, 100% looking for work. You throw vaccination policies in the mix with vulnerable populations. There's a lot of movement in that as well that we're seeing. So we constantly encourage people and let them know that we're here, but referrals coming in have dropped, and then people looking for our services specifically are on the decline. So it's everything that you're presenting is factual in what we've experienced over this past year.
Okay, so that's really interesting. I think maybe try to make a mark of that and save that a bit later on. Just that unmotivated and mental health part, I think is crucial. I think maybe, is there any other service provider that wants to maybe mention, or is there anything in the chat before I move on?
No comments in the chat in regards to the service providers. So
the one question I did want to ask is designated groups. Are we seeing an increase in designated groups? Is that just maybe the way the data is being recorded? That's what I'm confused about, is like the increase has been just every year going up and up and up in terms of designated groups.
So we would love to hear from the service providers in regards to designated groups, just so that we can get a better understanding of how to move forward as well. Victor, would you maybe like to explain a little bit more, maybe what designated groups is?
I'll move on, and then I'll let, if there's anyone in the chat that wants to mention, if they've, in their experience, have they had more newcomers, visible minorities, anything like that. I know there was an increase when there was actually a lot of Syrian refugees that came. I don't know if that is still an issue. But I will just go through the other programs quickly. So we did obviously see declines across the board. Apprenticeship, so new registrations declined, but active clients actually remained the same. So that's good. And maybe I'll mention skilled trades a bit later on, but these were similar across other geographies. LBS clients went up in the Western region. This is the one where it actually was a slight increase in the Western region in Ontario, while it declined in Hamilton. So Canada Ontario Job Grant did see drop in employers and clients. Youth Job Connect was major job losses, and Second Career, as I said, did go up. I think here I wanted maybe anyone from literacy. I don't know if Sarah, is she on the call, to maybe ask about her experience with LBS, and did she see a large drop off?
Hey, Victor.
Hey.
So what we see in terms of the roll-up data is that there's significant regression for Hamilton. So what we do for the literacy service plan is we actually get those individual organization reports and count them up, and our numbers have been quite strong. So because regression happens less than 10, there's kind of a significant difference between the CAMS like roll-up data that you would see and the actual numbers. So we're not seeing the same decline. So we've been kind of meeting those targets through the pandemic as well. So happy to share kind of what that looks like if I can dive into it a little bit more and give you a bit of a comparison.
Yeah, maybe we'll chat after, because I do remember actually now last year we were talking about the data. There's issues with the way literacy is being recorded.
Just as it comes down to the actual region, right? So so because anything less than 10 isn't counted, we found that there was a discrepancy in terms of the overall data analysis that we were doing. So yeah, we can follow up after.
Okay. Now, did you also see a drop in clients during COVID?
I'm just doing that analysis now, but not really, not significant. No.
Okay. So then in terms of literacy, then, like, you're still seeing a lot of clients like, look, I need to, improve my education to get jobs. Like, they're all understanding that then. Like, there isn't that issue of unmotivated clients that you maybe employment services are seeing?
I don't know. I mean, lack of motivation is a bit of a tough one, right? Because if they're connecting with a literacy and basic skills program, then odds are they are motivated because it's coming from them typically as a self-referral or an encouraged referral, but not necessarily a mandatory connection, right? So yeah, I'd have to kind of think about that a little bit.
Okay, no, that sounds good. Okay, we'll chat, but it does seem like LBS isn't, you guys still are getting lots of clients and there's still people coming in looking to increase literacy. So that's where I was with the data.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, things are going well. I think there's always work to be done in terms of, referrals to and from, because oftentimes throughout the pandemic, we heard that, clients were feeling very insular, right? And so if they were accessing a training or upskilling program, then they might not have really an appetite for accessing other community programs because of everything else in life that's going on. And similarly, we heard from our community partners in employment the same thing, right? Is that there, pre-pandemic, you might have seen a client accessing 2 or 3 services at a time to really achieve those positive outcomes. And during the pandemic, we didn't see as much of that, as far as I can tell.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. Okay. No, thank you. Yeah, maybe we'll chat after.
There was a comment in the chat. Thank you, Sarah. There was a comment in the chat by Arturo. Over at Center 3, we have art community-based employment programming for young people, our SHSM program nutshell, and 360 for youth, art and humanities grad seeking career placement. There has not been. Sorry, I'm just going to scroll down a little bit.
Or do you want me to just run through it really quick?
Yeah, that would be great, Arturo. I'm just seeing half of your message here, so that would be awesome.
No worries. It was very awkwardly typed really quickly. So basically,
no worries.
So I'm not the project coordinator on these 2 programs I mentioned. New Steel, which is an ArtShism, like an alternative education program for more vulnerable youth that want to get like hands-on, I guess, training and kind of like a co-op job placement. So there's that on the one hand that we offer, and the other one is 360 for Youth, which is more art and humanities grads looking for a career placement. So in both of those instances, we kind of notice the same sort of things, nothing in terms of the designated groups accessing these services more often, but in terms of a lack of motivation difficulty maintaining communications, especially during times where we couldn't have people in. And there was one other thing, return clients. So in our SHISM program, there was a lot of return individuals, which wasn't a usual occurrence. So yeah, I can connect you with the project coordinators that could probably give me or give you guys a better rundown of those numbers. But I suspect too, like in terms of the designated groups, maybe it's not exemplary of the data just because it's in like such a odd field, like the arts and creative sector. Maybe it has some confounding property or something.
Okay, no, thank you for the comment. We'll follow up as well with any other comments. So I will move on just because of the time right now. And maybe we'll get back to some of these, program concerns later on. So I just wanted to show now the other part now. We're getting into the jobs and job postings. So the good news is the job postings are going up, as some of us have alluded. So while this is the share of jobs, so the blue bar is 2020 and the yellow bar is 2021. And as you can see, the yellow bar coming in the summer is really going up. And we're getting Q3 data soon. And so it's along the same lines as we're seeing in July and August, September. The job postings are going up. So this is what I'm saying is that the labor market is in transition. When we're seeing a lot of job losses, people coming back, there still is a lot of, mental health issues. This is still in the fourth wave. But the jobs and employers are coming back first. These are the top 10 job postings in Hamilton, Q2. So education, there's post-secondary teaching and research assistants, college and other vocational instructors. I will say Brock University's data did get into here as well. So technically I know they're in Niagara. They are in this as well. That's why we see such an increase. But I feel like if you're looking for a professor type of job and you're in Hamilton, you would be still considering Brock. Licensed practical nurses, registered nurses, office support workers, retail salesperson, cooks, the home support workers are PSWs, material handlers. A lot of these jobs actually saw major declines during COVID, and now we're seeing job postings coming back. Now, are those the same amount? That's a question. I'm not sure if all the jobs that have gone away are coming back, but we are seeing some of these lower skilled jobs. Again, as I said, that story before that we said, oh my gosh, all these retail salespersons and cashiers won't get their jobs back. We are seeing it, returning quite a bit. Growing industries, so professional, scientific, and technical service. So this is from pre-COVID to COVID. Again, all the numbers are in thousands. The change. Professional, scientific, technical, these are high-skilled jobs. There could be engineers, architects, computer programmers, a lot of consultants in there. These ones have increased. I'll skip real estate right now. I'll talk about that in a second. Finance and insurance is going up as well. Again, a high-skilled sector. Retail, trade. So again, that's the sector that saw massive job losses during COVID. And now we're actually above pre-COVID levels in Hamilton. So again, that sector is recovering. Public administration. So not only is this obviously the government, there's a lot of COVID jobs in terms of helping with vaccinations. That did increase. Declining. So this is where I said that caveat about educational services. Again, in September, this sector will go up. This was because it was the summer. So some teachers count as unemployed. Transportation and warehousing. This one is interesting. This has constantly showed up. A lot of it could be, some of when I looked at businesses, there's a few businesses in warehousing that have gone down, the business counts data. But then the other area is the motor vehicle and transit drivers. So these could be taxi, limousine, and chauffeur. That's the occupational title that have declined. So I'm thinking that that's where we're seeing some weaknesses. There's heavy equipment operators. These are like crane operators, and we see some weaknesses there. I think that's where it's happening. That sector, though, I think will improve. As we know, DHL is coming to Hamilton. I think it was Amazon warehouse coming to Hamilton. There's a lot of material handlers that will be needed. So I don't particularly see that as a major concern, but in terms of these drivers and these occupations, that might be a concern, especially during COVID. Now, this is the one sector, manufacturing. This is the first or second or third largest sector in Hamilton. And that has gone down during COVID. So we're at 40,000. That's one of the lowest numbers it's been. So it's in a confusing sector because at the same time, they still are looking for general laborers and skilled trades workers. But overall employment is going down, and there could be mixed reasons as to what's going on, whether it's automation that's occurring or, you know, they're just companies are closing down. But that's where a lot of people are used to find employment, and it's going down consistently in Hamilton each year, each decade that goes on. Accommodation food service, I just want to mention that's where we've seen a lot of job losses during COVID. It's still down. Healthcare and social assistance is a little bit confusing. I think that's where some of the social assistance, the clients face-to-face, think of even massage therapists are in there. That's where we might see that weakness. But again, that's a sector that went down during COVID and is slowly going up. So that's not too concerning. So to the real estate and rental and leasing part, that is related to a lot of landlords. So I looked into the business counts data, and where we saw the growth are businesses that were sole proprietor in real estate. And when I was talking to another labor market analyst, they were saying that that refers to Hamilton's real estate, you know, boom that you're seeing. So there's a lot of gentrification that kind of alludes to it, a lot of landlords. So those aren't real jobs. I mean, some people could be getting jobs. Real estate agents could be increasing, right? I mean, that could be a good job for a lot of people, but we're seeing it's an industry that I don't think that employment level is true growth. I think it's related to a lot of the gentrification that we're seeing. So that's one that we have to keep a track of. This I just will quickly just show you. This is the job losses by females and males. Similar industries that I just showed you. The only other thing is other services, where there's a lot of personal salon, like beauty salons are in that sector, and we've still seen a huge loss in that area for females. And during COVID, I will probably continue seeing that. These are now occupations. You know, I think because of the time, I might just skip this. A lot of the occupations that I just mentioned are related to the industries. Again, professional occupations, business, finance, sales support, those are retail jobs. Professional occupations and natural administrative. This admin and finance supervisors, those are the landlords. That's where you see a lot of them. So it's unbelievable, like that they're counted as a job. And then job losses, we still see this one is service representatives. These are a lot of times in accommodation and food services. This transport heavy equipment operation, that's what I mentioned about transportation, why it's a bit confusing, why we're seeing transport heavy equipment operations, think of crane operator, you know, these types of jobs are going down. For EO service providers, this is the layoff industry that they came in with. So admin and support, waste management, remediation was the top layoff industry, which was a bit surprising. Accommodation, food, okay, that makes sense. Retail, trade, manufacturing. But again, they had a lot of clients from healthcare and social assistance as well. In terms of the job, which are typically related, service representatives, other customers. So these are typically retail, trade, or accommodation, food services, laborers, and a lot of manufacturing. And then these as well, these service types of jobs, again, were in retail, trade, and accommodation, food. So it's not too surprising. I'm surprised by that industry. In general, when we look at the skill level, most of the clients fall under skill level C and D. So again, it's not a surprise, but we did see an increase in skill level B. These are clients who typically have a college diploma. So we did see an increase in clients coming in with a post-secondary education. I don't know if any service providers did see that. I will save the questions maybe for later on, just because it's 10 to 11. But the questions we were going to ask is, did we see a difference in terms of clients being laid off? You know, I think Beth mentioned that there were some occupations that there was a difference. You know, are we seeing more clients entering training? Based on that, I've heard that not really. This is the last part of the presentation. So the wage is one aspect to see a labor shortage, okay? If we look at the overall wages of last year to this year, it hasn't budged that much. And we think of the inflation, we think of housing that has gone up. The overall wages haven't fully matched the growth we've seen in terms of inflation and housing and everything that you see. Now, again, this is in transition. This may change. When we look at Q3, possibly fall, winter, employers might adjust. When we look at the top 10 job postings and we look at their wages, yellow I highlighted as ones that you do see as, there might be some change. PSWs went from $18 on average to $25. That's a significant increase. Material handlers, and that's the one where these warehouses that they need people, that's gone up in terms of wages. Other customer service and information, these are a lot of times even call center agents that are in there, retail trade managers, maybe bartenders, but then you see truck drivers, administrative data, assistants, these are laborers, cooks, retail sales. The wages aren't too high. The inflation from Q2 to Q2 of 2020, 2021 is about 5-6%. So you don't see the wages, matching that overall across a lot of the top 10 job postings. Wherever you see a negative, I think that's the reason is because in Q2, remember there was a big drop off in occupation. So the comparison of job postings isn't the exact same. There was a smaller group last year than this year. And so if we were to have the exact same, I'm sure the numbers would be similar. I don't think too many job postings had a decline in wages. But I think the overall trend is that it's similar wages is what I would argue. So again, this is why I said some occupations, material handlers, general office support workers, PSWs, some bartenders, we have seen some wage increases, but it's not like we're seeing it everywhere. And again, from that slide before, it's not like it's in all occupations. And that's where the leads into sort of my final thoughts here is, when you look at, there's still being high unemployment rates. When you think of the rate that was the hidden unemployment rate, that's still high, compared to previous years. We look at still large job losses seen among females and core age workers. The overall wage rate's not growing rapidly. You throw that in, I haven't mentioned this, childcare concerns. Even during COVID, last week, me and my wife were fortunate to both work at home. We had a scare in the classroom. Both our children had to be home. So if you have a job that you can't work from home and you're trying to go in, typically these childcare concerns still fall on women. And so that's where we're seeing, I think, some of the job losses, why it's women. I think this childcare aspect is really important. At the same time, health and safety is still there. A lot of clients maybe, are afraid of the virus still, even if they're not getting vaccinated. There still can be a fear of going in and doing public facing. And this, I'm not trying to bash on any of employers, but the requirements for some of these minimum wage jobs during this pandemic have increased in terms of health and safety protocol, in terms of seeing people, understanding all the rules and regulations, and the wages need to be able to match those increased skills. And that's something that I would argue, I don't know if I've seen that yet. Especially people now are thinking about, with this time off, about possible changing careers. This could be a part of it. So it's a complicated picture. And to just state that there's a shortage and we need people to come back and cut all the government, wages that we're getting, like CERB and everything, I think is a bit short-sighted. We will see in these coming months, maybe the shortage appearing much more likely. CERB, I believe, is ending, the CRB. And maybe then you can start making that argument that, these people, aren't going to work when they should be doing it. But again, there is a wage discussion as well that is difficult to have. Now, some employers are matching it, some are doing it. But when you think of ways to mitigate this in terms of health and safety, good onboarding, showing career laddering for a lot of people, one manufacturer that I know, they always stress, when they hire entry-level workers, they don't treat them as just entry-level or precarious workers. They try to push them up the ladder, let them know, look, if you put in a little bit of training here, a little bit of training here, you will see, wage increases, you will see more responsibilities. And that employer doesn't have a general labor issue in terms of recruitment. There are a lot of other employers that do. And so the question again is these other aspects of career laddering, onboarding, the health and safety. I think those also need to be discussed rather than possibly, it's the CERB or people just don't want to work. There's a lot of other things going on. As I mentioned, childcare. So that's the end of my presentation. We do have these 4 questions. Now it's 5-2. Khadija, what do you
I was going to leave it up to everyone here.
Yeah.
We can either jump into the occupational final questions, or we can take about a 5-minute break and then jump into the community consultations. So
you know what? Maybe let's leave the floor open. If there's any comments, maybe we're at 11 o'clock, then we'll stop. If there's any comments about the job postings, the data, occupations, maybe you can speak to it now. I mean, I mentioned low skilled jobs, the first question. The second one is remote working, whether that will continue. I mentioned housing, that could be an issue. And the last one is just service providers. Is there anything that's missing in the community?
Yes. So let's leave it up to everyone to answer as they go. I do see a few hands already. So we'll just leave the floor open and we can start with Gisela.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for the for allowing me to participate. A couple of comments from McMaster's perspective. So I work in the Student Success Center, and we provide career and employment services to undergraduate students as well as alumni of McMaster University. We have seen lack of motivation to apply for positions at McMaster, and I'm looking into what is the trend there? What kinds of positions are students and alumni not applying to? And what is the reason? So I'm currently investigating that. But what we've seen is employers coming to us and saying, we have the jobs, students are not applying, alumni are not applying for the positions. So getting a better look at that. And the other comment that I wanted to also make is, where does entrepreneurship or side hustling play into this data? Because I've seen an increase amongst especially female clients having side hustles and making that their main source of income versus going back to the workforce, especially Victor, for some of the reasons you mentioned, daycare and having that flexibility that they so much need in their day-to-day lives. Just wondering if there's anything here.
Yeah. Now, when you say side hustle, is that a paid job, or is it under the table, or like, is there
entrepreneurship, more
entrepreneurship?
So
okay.
Entrepreneurship, yeah, like DIY kinds of entrepreneurship where people are, they're making it work.
I think so. That's a good point. So this, at the very beginning, I mentioned that there's so much to talk about the labor market, and I've been talking for 55 minutes, and there's going to be parts that I miss, and I agree. I think entrepreneurship is one area that I maybe missed, and then I can look into that a bit more. I don't know if I've seen it show up a lot in terms of entrepreneurship. I think that there's still so many issues in terms of businesses trying to even stay open, and there's the lockdown issues. Now, in terms of maybe it's online businesses, maybe that we are seeing growth in terms of that. The one area that I did see, I don't know if people are familiar with it, the multi-level marketing jobs, where it's, they purchase it and then they get other people to come together and they sell that. And if they sell it, they make money. I have noticed that going up. And there's been articles and research written about that with women. I will say with that, the argument they make for it is that it typically can be a sort of a predatory type of business. And I've seen a lot of women who end up spending more money on the products instead of actually selling it to other people. These are sort of the multi-level marketing businesses. And during COVID, these have skyrocketed among women because, as we were saying, with childcare, it's a nice job, but I don't know at the end of the day how effective that is in terms of getting good skills attached to the labor market and making money. Now, you may be talking about something completely different, and there definitely could be other jobs and that women are going into in entrepreneurship. The data hasn't showed that like other areas, but I will look into that. I do know our one business counts we keep track of, it's called business counts data. Businesses with out employees is growing. So those are businesses with, you know, obviously sole proprietor entrepreneurs. That is growing. And professional, scientific, technical, these are consultants. That has gone up. So consultants who can do it virtually are doing quite well. Some businesses that have always been virtual have, you know, increased in demand. So entrepreneurship is a mixed bag. I mean, it's hard to tell which ones. I will look into that a bit more. So, but thank you.
Yeah, it would be interesting. Sorry, it would be just interesting to know and understand that kind of the segment of the workforce.
Yeah.
And see if there are any gaps and any supports that are needed to maybe bring those businesses to fruition, right? To successful businesses in the community. We depend so much in small business that it would be something interesting to kind of look into.
Great.
From my perspective.
No, that's a very good point.
I think that's a really great point. I think it's a great connection to the lack of information we've also received about youth and employment. There's a lot of big connections between entrepreneurship and youth employment at this point. We've seen that increase tremendously over the pandemic. And this is just not from a data standpoint, but just from a community participant standpoint. You're seeing it all over social media. You're seeing it all over the community that youth are very much partaking in some forms of entrepreneurship rather than going back into part-time and full-time work. So that's also a really great reflection on the work that's being done. So something to keep in mind when thinking about entrepreneurship and connecting that with the youth unemployment rates as well. There is a quick comment. I think it was Hella that maybe have mentioned it. So this response is going back to your slide about the drop in Canada Ontario Job Grant Program applications. At Goodwill, the Amity, we have funding for the Canada Ontario Job Grant Program, and I can confirm that we have seen, I'm just going to scroll down here a little bit more. We have seen, oh, it took me all the way back to the top. Give me 2 seconds. My chat is kind of getting wonky. So concerns about how to keep on staff and stimulation, keep their businesses alive as a part of the situation in the pandemic is now improving. We have seen a slight increase in the COJG application. So thank you for that, Hella. That was a great comment. I'm going to pass it over
I'm sorry, before you move on, I think there's a couple of lines that you may have missed. So basically my point was this, that we here at the Goodwill Career Center, we do have funding for the Canada Ontario Job Grant Program. We call it the COJG, the COJG. And essentially, let me just go back to my comment. Right, and essentially we did see a significant drop in Canada Ontario Job Grant applications, specifically in 2020 with the onset of the pandemic, because we feel the employers were shifting their mindsets from training their staff. That's what the COJG applications are for, right? It's to train their staff. So there was a shift in mentality from training their staff to keeping their employers or the employers. Let me just read the comment. I think that'll make more sense. Okay, so that we have seen a significant drop in COJG applications, particularly in 2020 during the onset of the pandemic. We feel that the priority of employers shifted from training their staff to maintaining their staff roster. So with the number of lockdowns, staff were laid off and then hired back on again on an ongoing basis. So as a result, employers seem to be more so concerned about how to keep their staff while simultaneously also keep their business alive, right? Mm-hmm. I can confirm now that in the year of 2020, we have seen a bit of an increase of COJG applications, and we think this is due to the pandemic now also sort of improving and the number of vaccinated individuals going up. I'm not sure.
Okay, so that's good. So this year we are seeing an increase now.
Definitely, this fiscal year. Yeah, so it was the year of 2020 where we definitely saw a huge, significant drop in applications, but in 2021, I feel like we see a bit of an increase again.
That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing.
Can we get Raymond to maybe?
Yeah, I was just about to pass it over to Raymond. Your hand's been up for quite a while.
Okay, thank you. So to Khadija and Victor, I really appreciate the content of your presentation. So to me, I would just like to suggest that maybe a portion in there or one slide about newcomers, right? Because I'm a newcomer too, and my experience, I would say, wasn't really good enough in terms of getting into the field. So I'm just me, if there's like hundreds or thousands of newcomers, immigrants, skilled worker immigrants coming in, which I have heard, like I went to Oakville, I heard of a lawyer from China, and she said she's going back home to China because she couldn't get a job or something like that. Or even now with Goodwill, I'm dealing with a client who was a CEO in finance in Colombia, and I was helped as a job developer. We have to help her with getting the job, but it seems that because also of her English, she has to start in Wendy's, Tim Hortons, or even there's another situation of an electrician from Saudi Arabia. He has the skills, but no license. So maybe in our study, we should include this kind of like, for me, it's very important that one slide of the newcomers, how are they in there? Are they getting survival jobs? Or how are they after a year, after a 2 year, do they get the skill, the field that they want to get in?
Yeah, that's a good point. I will say, so we as well have been looking into data on newcomers and visible minorities, and getting local level data is not really that possible. So you have to go at the provincial level. So I know when I was going through it, I thought maybe I should have thrown that in. So I do apologize. The Ontario level data, I think, still resembles the trends that are probably true here. It's just because I try to focus on Hamilton, I didn't include it. I did do a gender and age breakdown. I thought, given the amount of information, do I just maybe skip that and then mention it? But so I appreciate your comment. And that's what I was even alluding to with the designated groups, if we are seeing an increase. What I will say is, based on the Ontario level data, it's not surprising that immigrants, especially ones that are newcomers, so here 5 years or less, and visible minorities consistently have higher unemployment rates than Canadian born. So that's not a surprise. That's where the structural issue comes in. What is also interesting, though, is the labor force participation rate. So that's people who are either working or looking for work, is actually very high among newcomers, higher than the Canadian born. So you see that when they come here, they are looking for jobs, actively looking for a job. To be considered unemployed, you're looking for a job, I think, once every 2 weeks, I think the stats can definition. So they're applying. So they have higher unemployment rates, but they also are higher in the labor force participation, looking for jobs. And actually, the employment rate changes. So that's how many people actually have a job by the population among older workers. So if you're an older worker, 55 and over, you're more likely to be employed for newcomers or immigrants at that point, maybe, than Canadian born. So what we're seeing is younger immigrants and newcomers have a harder time finding job. By the time they get a bit older, they're likely to stay in the labor market longer than Canadian born. And so this can be a structural issue. Maybe, Raymond, what I can do is share with you a couple slides, and I've shown Khadija this as well. She's been at HIPC meetings. We can share with you some data at the provincial level that might help. But your point is well taken, and I'll try to incorporate that a bit more. I know we are also getting census data next year that will have local level data for newcomers, immigrants of any length of time here, visible minorities. And so that's probably something that we will be diving into a bit more, and have maybe even a project related to that, because the census is the best way to get accurate information. That's honestly a data gap that is hard to get over.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Raymond, for mentioning that. We've had numerous conversations about the lack of information we've been able to get in regards to newcomers in the Hamilton region specifically. So hopefully, with the connection of with our new We data tools, we'll hopefully be able to gather some more information with that as well. So thank you.
So I have a comment here from Sarah. HIPC is working on a project around hiring newcomers in Hamilton. More data would be helpful. Thank you, Raymond, for bringing this up. Thank you.
Thanks. Should we take our 5-minute break now, Khadija, or what do we?
We'll probably take we'll jump to 2 minutes. Just get your coffees refreshed. If you can come back with your cameras on, we will be starting our community consultation. Thank you.
So Khadija, is it Shelly that has her screen sharing now?
Yes, so Shelly is going to be sharing her screen now. It should be all up. And we would start asking everybody to come back from their little break as we jump into the community consultations. Probably give everybody just another minute to return back. And once again, if possible, we can see your lovely faces so that we can continue having this conversation as face-to-face as possible during these online sessions. Just seeing everybody starting to trickle back in. Okay, great. We'll jump right into it, only just to keep time as a factor. I hope everybody was able to, at least get a coffee or at least refresh their water in any way. So welcome back. This portion of our presentation is the community consultation. And we will be, going through a lot of different conversations. And to begin that conversation, we're going to be taking a look into the 2020-2021 priorities. Hopefully you are all able to get the opportunity to look at the priorities that we were able to send out in the invitation. Because these community-based conversations are priorities, I'm sure many of you are familiar with some of these goals, but we will just take a close look into our first few priorities. Great. Perfect. So once again, these are the 2020-2021 key priorities. The first one looks into identifying critical labor market trends in the post-pandemic evolving economy. So as we continue to explore employer needs to better understand where the opportunities are in our local labor market. So some of the action plans that we have started to participate in or have already started to participate in with Workforce Planning Hamilton is upgrading Hamilton's only labor market information source, which is our job board, Employer One surveys, the quarterly snapshots that we've been able to recently post. Actually, that was just in our last newsletter from last week, which goes into keeping up to date with our newsletter. So once again, just updating our workforce planning website just so that we can have that as a reflection. The second priority looks into understanding the competencies needed, available currently, and in the future. So once again, just identifying what skills are needed among current openings and what skills there are among the unemployed, and crucial to understanding what is the needs and what needs to be done. So connecting, some of the actions we've taken in regards to that is connecting with Hamilton's small to medium skilled trades employers. That is currently a survey that we are doing to reach about 100 employers to get a better understanding of what their current needs are. Our employer engagement project, so the monthly LMI updates that we've been able to also post on our social media, as well as our newsletter. And if you do need that request, you can always feel free to just email us. We'll be able to provide that for you. And then just working with our OLMP partners, which is Women at Work, Mohawk Challenge 2025, and HIPSI, which we just recently mentioned. So the third priority looks into barriers for youth entering the labor market. So those barriers of young people during the economic disruptions of our community now faces. So we were able to really pinpoint there is a need for youth and unemployment. We just spoke about that in regards to entrepreneurship, and us just focusing on the youth virtual networking engagement, also known as our virtual youth committee. And once again, connecting with McMaster in regards to connect to careers, our C2C committee, which looks into job fairs that's going to be happening. I got a thumbs up from Gisela, so yes. As you know, these are a lot of the community work that we are doing involves you all as community partners, which is great. So you'll be able to see these transcend over to the actions that we have been able to provide to you for today. The last two priorities look into encourage and promote best practices in recruitment and retention to SMEs. So sharing information and resources with small to medium employers to support better HR management. So the career laddering project that we've been able to do with ABEA has been very tremendous in regards to getting a better understanding of the different career options, as well as connecting with Hamilton Small to Medium Skilled Trades, or once again, our SME project, and hiring, now hiring Hamilton for SMEs. And then last but not least, the mental health affects our workers and unemployed. So once again, we know that the pandemic, and even prior to the pandemic, mental health has always been a very important aspect in regards to employment. And we just want to make sure that we are getting up to date with the current trends that are happening with mental health, and being able to provide information to employment services on mental health services so that they can assist job seekers. So once again, connecting with the Canadian Mental Health Association for our mental health and employment event that will be taking place next month, early November. So if you are interested in participating in that, please feel free to send me an email, and I will be sure to add you to the list of further invitations as well. But as we just once again, keeping in mind, these are the key priorities as we go into our conversations in our breakout rooms. I will be passing it over to Norhan, who will be taking lead in this conversation.
Thank you, Khadija. So I'm Norhan, the admin coordinator. We also have Shelly, who's our Zoom administrator, and she will be guiding us with few instructions on how to do the polling and all of that. So those priorities are led by the community and workforce planning of Hamilton, and we're all working towards serving and helping our community. So considering our discussion today, do you think these priorities are still most critical? So what we will be doing right now is we will divide ourselves into 3 different groups in breakout rooms, and we would like to discuss, share, brainstorm together, and please pick one volunteer to come back and share everything with the entire group. So another thing is, as soon as we come back, we'll do polling. And yeah, so I believe we will be starting the breakout rooms right now.
So yes, I'll open up the breakout rooms. And how much time are we going to have?
So are we still doing 10 minutes, or is it going to be 5 to 10 minutes?
We will just have a conversation for about 5 minutes and then bring it back to the larger group. Thank you, Shelly. Thank you, Norhan.
Super. Now you should be getting your join breakout room message.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
How's it going, everyone?
Good, Khadija. How are you today?
Good, good. You know, we've been able to get a lot of great information so far, and I think this is my favorite part of the community consultation, just being able to grab a few of you and just have a little bit more of a private conversation, although it is being recorded, but just to have a overall conversation on some of the questions that we have for you. So once again, please provide examples of what you find to be the most critical in regards to the priorities that we've been able to list off. Feel free to ask me once again what those priorities were. I was able to zoom through it a little bit, but these are the projects that we are currently working on, and we just want to make sure that these priorities are still remaining critical. So I will pass it over to you, whoever wants to go first.
The priorities are the ones that you had sent as a PDF document in your email, right?
Yes, those are the priorities, and just the ones that I listed off are the same ones. So once again, I can just go through it as a quick little overview. So we were able to identify labor market trends, and then understanding the current needs of employers, youth, the barriers that youth currently are facing, mental health and employment, as well as just encouraging and promoting best practices for recruitment and retention for small to medium employers. Any thoughts in regards to that?
I actually have It's Hila, by the way, Hila.
Hila, okay. I've been saying
Right.
Hela this entire time.
That's okay. So about any concerns that employers have, I work at the Goodwill Career Center and I'm a job developer, just so you guys know. And as a job developer, my role is to connect with employers in our community to assist their clients secure employment. I have been reaching out to a lot of employers recently, and the response that I'm getting is that employers are struggling to find reliable staff members. And that is because with this pandemic, all the lockdowns, the CRB or the CERB staff members, or when the business closes down, staff members are laid off, right? And then after a few weeks, they come back. For a lot of those staff members, it may not necessarily be worth coming back because they have children at home, right? And then going back to work and then taking the risk of being laid off again is sort of challenging for them, if that makes sense, right? So this is what a lot of employers are struggling with, especially employers in the fast food industry, I find. Finding reliable staff members during this pandemic and even now at the recovery stage of the pandemic as well.
Absolutely. That is definitely something that we've been hearing from employers, just not only just the reliability, but overall soft skills, being able to come on time and being able to just willingly participate in the work that's in front of them is something that we've heard from employers. And we know that there's a give and take, right? There's also that need for employers to also encourage. So it's definitely been a conversation, and we're trying to encourage employers on how to better have that retention, and also being able to encourage employees to stay. So what can we do to kind of go about doing that? Arturo, I'll pass it over to you. Thank you, Hila.
Thank you. That's sort of echoed as well in terms of like the service provider sector. We were in a City of Hamilton like conference kind of like this, where people we work with, like Threshold School of Building and the HRIC, mentioned that even our incentives, like financial incentives, like free TVs, things like that, to try to coax youth into accessing these services were becoming less and less effective. And it's because of this, like the issues with mental health, and namely too, we've noticed people, young people don't know where to start to even look for these resources to address their mental health concerns. Especially those that don't have post-secondary education. So those are valuable resources. There's also that, what's it called? You mentioned the mental health. Anyway, I'll follow up on an email about something else. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Arturo. Gisela? We do have. Sorry, just a quick second. We do have 1 minute. So I just want to make sure that we have a volunteer who will be able to pass this information over. So I don't want to tell anyone, but please volunteer as you can.
Just a couple of comments is, I think that the priorities are still very much relevant to what we are trying to measure in our community. One thing is, could we, in terms of the youth barriers, could we have kind of a segmented kind of youth barrier report where we talk about the youth that have education versus youth who don't and have barriers to education? And then the other thing is, can we also, in terms of youth, celebrate some of the successes? I don't know if it's something that could tie to this priority, but there might be strategies out there that are actually.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone. We were able to continue the conversation. Sorry to Gisela, she was cut off there a little bit, but definitely some great conversations happening. I will ask that we stop sharing our screen just so that we can see everyone and have a larger conversation of what we were able to participate in our breakout rooms. Go ahead, Nurhan.
All right, so I believe, Sarah Gull, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. We had two Sarahs in our group, so
Yeah, and it was-
Tag, you're it, I guess.
Thank you so much.
So we had an opportunity to review those priorities that you talked about, Khadija. And I think overwhelmingly in our group, it was like, yes, this makes perfect sense to continue. But there was some brief discussion at the end about incorporating particular initiatives with a focus on women, just with the information that Victor highlighted in terms of the ongoing issues around, certainly around multiple issues, but of course, childcare, the unemployment rates, wage parity, et cetera. Maybe we didn't talk about that. I might be making that up. Anyway.
No,
and then,
okay,
good. There's a lot of information in the first hour and it's just still seeping in.
Thank you.
And also, actually, Nurhan made an amazing point about just kind of bringing us back to employers and their role in terms of training and encouraging folks to take training and move kind of with the reference to career ladders. So those are the two kind of main additions that we had. So focus on women and encouraging employers to initiate those training programs again and to seek out potentially community partners that might make sense for them.
Sarah? Those are really great.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks a lot.
I just put those in my notes quickly as we continue because I think they were really great points.
They were, and it also affects the mental health. So they were really all great, like amazing points to discuss for sure. Thank you. We'll pass it to your team, Khadija.
Perfect. I know we didn't get to discuss who is going to be volunteering, so I'm going to leave the floor open to whoever was in my breakout room to just give a brief overview. I see Arturo nodding. I knew you were going to go for it. Go ahead.
Sorry, everybody. I feel like I'm taking up so much space in this Zoom meeting, so I'll try to make this quick. So we talked a lot about the motivation aspect. I think Hila, is that the proper way of saying it? Perfect. Was talking about how CERB did seem to affect, I guess, employers obtaining reliable staff members, especially when that childcare angle was kind of applied to the situation. I talked about the youth side a little bit more in terms of the mental health aspect and how that influenced motivation as well. So we're kind of seeing financial incentives not being as effective as turnout in terms of youth accessing services, and also the lack of information to youth, educated or otherwise, to access mental health services. Specifically, youth that don't have that education have a lower vernacular and understanding on where to even look for these sort of supports. And that was it. We also talked about there needing to be a discrepancy between educated and uneducated youth. And yeah, I think that's it, everybody. Hopefully you got it.
I think Gisela just made a really great comment about also being able to celebrate the work that youth are currently doing as well. And I think that was a really good point. And I think we're always consistently talking about the lack of information we are getting from youth, but seeing, it transcending over into the community, also being able to celebrate it, and also being able to celebrate as a whole what we're doing, and just being able to, once again, contribute back to the community. So Giselle, I see your hand up, so I'll let you take over.
Yeah, just I got cut off, but just analyzing the successes, right? To see what is happening in our community that's working and how can we increase that, right? I think is a good strategy as well.
Thank you. I will pass it over to Victor's group.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't as well clear who was going to be speaking. Someone wants to put up your hand. If not, I mean, I don't mind just mentioning the main points. So all right, here I go. So all the main priorities they agreed were still on point. I think it was there wasn't really anything, that those are like, oh, you missed the boat on that. There was mentions of the macro level of needing that first priority of understanding the labor market in general is a really good, even first step in starting to understand, the micro level. So continuing doing analysis on that big part, what's going on, these trends, especially as I mentioned before, the next few months, it could be even more important. But then when you dive in a bit more, we do focus on youth. That should be continued. As was mentioned before as well, there aren't too many programs even that are accessible for youth. So I think there still needs to be work in that area. Immigrant newcomer data as well. I don't know if that could be a priority itself or it could be fit under one of those, but I think now with the census coming out, that's a good opportunity to focus on that as well. So in general, the women, youth, newcomer data, visible minority data, if we can do a better job of incorporating maybe all of that, I think that would be helpful. There's also a comment about working, maybe understanding what other regions are doing, because we're under the SSM model now, and how our service providers or even the planning boards, and that's something that maybe we even need to do better, is how is it the situation in your area. We tend to focus on Hamilton and just comment on other areas or Ontario, but maybe getting a better understanding of what's happening Peel, Halton, Niagara, Brantford, around that might help with our work as well. So I thought that was a good comment. If I missed anything in my group, feel free, but I think that was it. We could have kept going on. The 5 minutes felt almost too short, but
Very
I think
short.
we'll get a chance at the end if there's any other comments to mention.
Just one other thing, Victor, if I can.
Mhm.
When we were talking about kind of collecting data and information about youth and immigrants and groups like that, we also thought it was very important to not just step back and look in on those folks, but to start to have some conversations with people from those groups to see, what their reality really is, and not just what we can do for them, but really identifying what they need.
Exactly. That's a good point. Sorry, I missed that. Yeah, because a lot of times, even with youth, I think Aaron was mentioning, we kind of sort of are talking to them about what needs to be done, rather than, they're taking advantage of the opportunity and doing it. It's not just a one-way street. So that's a good point. Thanks, Aaron.
I just had an additional thought. See, there you go. My mind is working now. One of the conversations in talking about this system service manager, in Hamilton, and I know we kind of haven't touched on the persons with disabilities. And one of the hopes I know with kind of incorporating all of the programs with Ontario Works and provincially was to profile more individuals with disabilities and connecting them with employment. And now I think that this is I wish that it was fully integrated in normal stream, but now with the virtual stream, this might incorporate more opportunities for individuals if work exists for virtual settings for some that perhaps physically might have been inhibited before. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that trend goes. And I can't speak that, I'm trying to look across the board in terms of with the EO data, but it'd be great to see, we're trying to definitely profile that in the skilled trades in general, how supports can exist for individuals and to kind of believe in their abilities and how they're contributing to the skilled trades as a career. But I think overall with the service system manager in Hamilton, it would be great to kind of see if any of those outcomes and that population contribute to kind of the labor market.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good point. I mean, I don't know the service system manager, Grant Collins, I guess he's not on this call, but we can have chats with him about that and how it relates to our work and the service providers. Now, but then, Louise, are you focusing mostly on the person with disabilities and the virtual aspect? Is that your main?
No, I'm thinking overall and kind of putting my previous kind of ministry hat on, that I know that one of the kind of the Employment Ontario transformations was to increase access for individuals with disabilities and kind of have more of those wrapped around supports. So I'm just kind of more talking in general terms, but now because more opportunities have been created virtually, that, could some of that match exist for individuals, in that area that perhaps were, inhibited before for whatever barriers could contribute there.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And you kind of wonder some disabilities too in a virtual environment, if it's whether it's more conducive or less conducive to even finding employment. That's a good point.
Thank you all for sharing your great thoughts, and I'm pretty sure we'll take a lot into our considerations, a lot of these points. Now I'll just share my screen. So we will go into voting right now. I believe, Shelley, you have the link in our chat.
Right, so I'm going to actually take over sharing if I can.
Yes, sorry.
So that I can go to oops, get into my. So as people vote, that will change the way the numbers appear. But if you
can you share the link again, please?
Oh, sure. Let me try that again. And so if you can go by the axes on each side, so strongly disagree or strongly agree of what the highest for you priority might be, and then sort of your middle priorities, and then what you think might be the least on your score.
And it doesn't have to be almost, I would say, a strongly disagree, just like maybe it's not as important, because I don't think anyone strongly disagrees with any.
Correct.
Just based off your opinion on what you find to be, one of the strongest priorities versus the ones that, can be a little bit later on that we can.
Yeah.
I love the fact that this is just going back and forth. This is great. So we will give everybody maybe about a minute or two just to go through that survey and just put in their results, and then we'll be able to take it up as a larger group. I almost wish we had a little bit of music.
Yeah, that's what we need.
Just a little bit of music, keep the encouragement going.
I don't know if it's what kind of music you would select, or maybe that
you should put that
Jeopardy music.
That Jeopardy.
When they're writing down their answers.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone can sing. DJ or Norhan, can you girls sing?
No. Just
Whoa.
a background music, eh? Something to get them excited. Yeah.
So does anybody need any more time to complete the survey? Just let us know if you're still working on it. Okay, well, we see a lack of movement happening. So it looks like everybody's been able to put in their responses. Does anybody else need any time? I'm just flipping through. Okay, great. Well, we do see here that, so once again, which priorities are most critical? We are seeing that the larger group finds that identifying critical labor market trends in the post-pandemic evolving economy is one of the strongly agreed top priorities. And then we're seeing that there is a follow-up in regards to understanding the competencies needed, available currently in the future at 4.2. which is great as well. So we are seeing that, a lot of these responses are almost identical in regards to the strongly agree. Barriers for youth entering the labor market, once again, 4.1, encouraging and promote best practices in recruitment and retention, and mental health effects in workers and employees are almost at the 3 levels. So 3.4 for encouraging and promoting best practices, and mental health effects of workers and employment 3.9, which is great. So we do see that overall, mostly all of these are strongly agree, which is great to see. And as we continue on, we will be very mindful of this polling just to get a better understanding of what you all agree on currently. So thank you so much for participating in that. We will be making sure that we keep that in our notes for future interactions. I'll pass it over back to you.
Okay, so we're doing. So we will then know like what are the opportunities gaps for job seekers, what can we do to bridge the gap, and should we add any priorities? So you're more than welcome to share and discuss right now, or leave it in the comment chat. So
yeah, and if I can just add too, I think we did mention a bit, and some people, and I know some people in my group maybe didn't get a chance to even talk. So I think this is the open floor, really.
Yeah, so please go ahead and let's share our thoughts. It was only 5 minutes and we had to leave. So I know a lot of us had good points, so we may as well share it with the bigger group.
So once again, the questions are.
So we can go back to Hollywood Squares.
The Hollywood Squares is what we need. Perfect. Great. So once again, just going through the questions and understanding the community discussions are, where are the priorities and gaps for job seekers? What can we do to bridge the gap? And should we add any other priorities? So just feel free to participate in that.
I have a comment in the chat from Louis. Youth, as the pandemic lifts, more youth in the skilled trades will have opportunities for mentorship.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention, sorry, it was the skilled trades. It doesn't always show up in like the top 3 jobs or the top industries, but I did mention in manufacturing, and that's one of the projects that we're looking at is skilled trades is like constantly needed all throughout the pandemic. Even during the biggest, drops, employers still needed skilled trades workers. That's one area that will always seems to be needed. Young people don't seem to be going even into that area. It's either they focus on maybe some post-secondary, but not enough of skilled trades. So
I also have a comment from Sarah that I missed. That gap that we are hearing about often is access to digital technology and digital technology skills to live, learn, and work online. Good point.
Absolutely. We'll pass the floor over to Melanie.
Yeah, I was just going to comment, in terms of local Hamilton employers, I think there might be a gap in terms of access to employer information, and especially during the pandemic where there wasn't that face-to-face, how are employers connecting with youth in particular, I think is a challenge that needs to be addressed with the employers in the Hamilton region.
Thank you, Melanie. I saw Louise's hand was also up. Sorry, Nurhan.
That's okay. Sorry.
I was clapping with Victor's comment. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great. You can clap on this? I don't know.
Yeah, there's the 2 hands. There's the raise the hand, and then there's the clap, which is great. So feel free to continue clapping if you do agree with some of the comments that are being made. Any other thoughts in regards to the community discussions, in regards to maybe looking into some of the priorities that we haven't been able to list off?
Yeah, and even service providers. I mean, is there anything missing in the community that might be needed? I know the unmotivated workers was brought up, mental health. We can think of specific even actions or anything like that.
I think once again, looking into newcomers and immigration into the Hamilton region is always going to be a priority for us. So we'll definitely make sure to add that down just so that we can continuously look into it as well. Any other thoughts before we move on?
I think Sarah has her hand up.
Oh, perfect. Sarah, go ahead.
Just a couple of things. So I'm Sarah, I'm from Mohawk College. I work on the Challenge 2025 initiatives, and that one of the things we're really starting to get the ball rolling on is an Indigenous strategy for our work with Challenge 2025 and also with City School. So I know we've talked a lot today about youth and newcomers, and I wonder if there might be an opportunity to also include the Indigenous community in some of the data and maybe the work that we're looking to do. So that's my one thing. And then the second thing that we've started to identify really at City School is, and I bring this up today because I think it ties in with motivation really well, is starting to just bring some of those like lighter touch point opportunities to start to re-engage and re-motivate people, whether that's through a workshop series. We're always looking to get people in courses and things like that at City School, but we have also noticed that folks aren't quite ready for all of that right away. And I think as we see people kind of returning to the workforce from the pandemic in any way that they've been displaced, there's the hesitancies that we've talked about for a variety of reasons today. So I'm starting to really be creative about programming. So just wanted to offer that for the other service providers in the chat today as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. I think also focusing on just BIPOC in general. So the Black, Indigenous, people of color, and just looking into that as well. I know that, like I said, we've had a few conversations. Victor and I specifically had a few conversations into looking into more data that reflects not only in the Hamilton region, but I also like that aspect of being able to look into the horseshoe region, right? So the Niagara region, Brantford as well, and Burlington, just so that we can get a better understanding of our neighbors as well. So thank you for that, Sarah. I will pass it over to Sarah Whelan. Two Sarahs here.
Yeah, thank you very much for this, and Victor for the really excellent presentation. I guess I have been involved in these in the past, but not recently, and these labor market planning exercises. I'm just curious, like when you identify priorities for the coming year, what does that mean exactly? Does that mean you're going to do a project on each of these or an event? I think I would like to use this little moment of platform to encourage partnerships. I see that there's trends and issues that are rising to the top that are related to multiple organizations here. And it seems to me that we have, your Workforce Planning Hamilton is small. You have a small but mighty team. So working on Indigenous issues or newcomer labor market access, that, if we could identify projects that we can work on in partnership, then this would seem to make good sense for me, and it would fit well with HIPC as we have a collective impact strategic plan where we're looking to move the whole community in the same direction towards increasing economic stability for newcomers and newcomer families.
Absolutely, Sarah. I think that's a great point, because that's the point of this community consultation here, is that when we have these important conversations, we know how to reflect that onto our upcoming projects, our upcoming webinars, our upcoming presentations, whatever it may be. But it's a great way to really just identify these key goals and continue on with this conversation. So having everyone here and having everyone involved in this conversation is how we continuously being able to partner up with one another and really have these strategic plans unfold. And with this conversation, we have goals in mind, we have key priorities in mind, and that way we will always be able to partner up and connect with the larger group on how we can go about completing these projects. So that's really a great point. And you all are on our contact list, and which is why you're all here right now, just so that we can continuously have these conversations and connect with one another. So thank you for that point.
Yeah, and I can just add, like, this is a community plan. So the things that are there, it's not just WPH. We obviously can't do it all. We'll lead, small business. Paul was doing a lot of other work in the retention area, so it's areas that maybe we can help with here and there, but we always try to position as a community plan for workforce development that a lot of other groups will take the lead on.
We have two new comments from Nicola. Skill set, keeping people's skills current is a high priority for employers. Increases in remote working, advance in technology, and constant change have employers looking at employer skill transition. How knowledgeable and experts can be shared across functional areas, example like digital skills and data analysis, Power BI, and so on. Also, Sarah Gall is asking, how will vaccination policies affect people's access to work? These are another two good points as well.
Yeah, that's a good question too, Sarah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I do know that there are even low vaccination rates in some parts of Hamilton in terms of marginalized communities. So
also, there's a lot of people that refuses to complete their vaccination, which is also can affect, and so
yeah,
it's
we're also
still
seeing the rise of just data in regards to how many of the current employees are being vaccinated. I know that there was some release, I'm not sure exactly if it was in Hamilton, but I know a few hospitals have been just releasing their percentages of their employees who are being vaccinated versus not being vaccinated. And I think the rate is, currently increasing, but there are a few employees who are not. So I think that's a really great point in looking into that a little bit more. Just to keep up with time, Raymond, I know that you were able to raise it, or you were raising up your hand, so we'll have you finish it off, and then we can also move on to the next activity.
All right, thank you, Khadija. So I know you mentioned in priorities there, understand the competencies needed or available currently or in the future. So I also encounter some barriers coming in for like the newcomer's point of view. Like when they come in here, when employers look at the resume, employers will say, you don't have a Canadian experience, or this is really the thing, the very important thing, you don't have a Canadian license. Like electrical, you need to have a 322A license. For an accountant, you should have a Canadian license. So those things, I'm not sure how would we incorporate that on your priorities. I just want to add. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we will go on to the next activity here.
And we're going to use your function called annotate. So on the next slide, there'll be some blank space for us to type into. In order to find your annotate, there should be a menu bar, maybe at the top of your Zoom or at the bottom. And under View Options, you would select Annotate. When that menu appears, be sure to circle text, make sure that's clicked on. And under Format, you can pick your font. But if you don't select text, it often comes up as draw, and you start typing and you have a kindergarten looking stick thing in the middle of the page. So just be sure that you're on text. And if you want to change up the color, you can do that using Format.
Mine was under View Options. I clicked View Options and then I see Annotate. Yeah.
Yes, that's where you find that. Oops.
I think, and we have 5 minutes left, so I think basically
Just take a minute or two just to put these down.
Yeah, if we don't get everybody's priority, I think it's okay. There was a lot mentioned already, but if there's anything that that comes to mind, just put some actions. It doesn't have to be even in a priority. I know a lot was already mentioned, and we've all made notes of that. We've been taking notes, but this is sort of, I guess, the last chance to include some type of actions that you think maybe are needed in the community. I thought this would be a neat way of doing it. I don't know what our group thought, but I don't know. Might be complicated. I don't know. Oh, it's kind of okay. It's working out.
Great. We will give everyone just another minute to put in their thoughts. I'm loving all the comments so far. Okay, great. So we will take this and we will make sure that we are keeping note of all your comments. Thank you so much for participating in this section of the annotation. I know it was a little bit fun. We got to pick a few colors and being able to post this up. So we will keep track of this and then we can move on. So once again, thank you so much for your participation in today's labor market and community consultation presentation. So I think it was a really great conversation. And once again, Workforce Planning Hamilton will be sure to keep all of these comments and the way that you've been able to participate today in mind when we are continuing the conversation into the priorities of 2021 as well as 2022. If you do have any other comments or questions or just anything that you are trying to get a hold of, please feel free to contact us at info@workforceplanninghamilton.com, or you can also send us a message on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at Workforce Planning Hamilton.